Hello, one and all. Thank you so much for joining me tonight for the first episode in our series Spotlight on HIV/AIDS. We will be having, we'll be talking with several persons who support persons surviving HIV/AIDS medically. We will also be talking to persons who are surviving HIV/AIDS, and we will be hearing their stories as well. With us tonight is Karimah Tarazi, and she's going to be sharing her perspective on HIV/AIDS as it relates to her global work, of course, because she has been working internationally for over 40 years, um, fighting um, this issue. And of course, we will also be hearing her views on Chile as it relates to HIV/AIDS and the perspective. All right. Just a little bit about me. My name is Nicole Littlejohn. I wrote my first book, If Love Had a Heart. It is based on teenage romance. It also deals with how these two teenagers need to overcome discrimination and a lot of um, stigma related to HIV/AIDS. All right. So I started writing that book when I was just in high school, and I saw firsthand the discrimination that many persons faced. And I was not appreciative of this kind of treatment. All right. I saw persons who were once family, now pariah, just based on misinformation. I did not appreciate it because I thought to myself, what if it were me? So I started writing my book, and I promised myself that I would not write anything else until I published that book. That journey took me 20 years. Okay. And though I had the support of my family, my friends, everyone, it was splendid. Thank you all for everything that you did. Even so, I had the crippling fear that most writers have. I published my book, and I also was privileged to be a part of the virtual book tour. You can also find those links on my website. I will give you the link at the end of the show. Um, that gave me the confidence to step forward and actually speak to persons who are on the ground. Well, I've always been talking to persons on the ground, but this would be my first time speaking to persons surviving HIV/AIDS to hear their story. Okay, so tonight with us we have Karimah Tarazi, but it seems that she might have been disconnected briefly. Um, Let me see if I can get her back. We were here talking for maybe half an hour, and now she seemed to have dropped, but she has been on the ground working with persons for so long, seeing so many things in different countries. Okay. And of course, okay, I think she's back with us. Karima, you're back. Thank you.
I don't
Thank
know
you
what
for
happened.
joining
All of a
us.
sudden, everything went black.
That's okay. It happens at the best of times. But you are not late. You are never late. Thank you for being here. Just go ahead and maybe introduce yourself. Tell everyone who you are and just a little bit about you. Okay? Whenever you're
Oh,
ready.
okay. My name's Karimah Tarazi. I am a 61-year-old Palestinian nurse who was educated in the U.S. I started my career as an emergency medical technician at the beginning of that disease that we several years later began calling HIV and AIDS. That is only one of the challenges that I've seen throughout my life. Unfortunately, I've lived through 4 epidemics in my life and 1 pandemic. And even though I kept calling HIV and AIDS a pandemic, which still is going on 42 years after it was recognized as a disease, um, it's manageable now. It has a lot of hope, but in the beginning stages, it was very scary. What else would you like to know about me? I'm a nurse.
I've also been told that you're a doctor. I've heard that before, Dr. Karima.
Oh, no, 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 no,
I've
no.
heard
That
it.
is okay. That is an honorary degree that someone thought that I should have, but I am a nurse. I do not have a doctorate. I have written some papers, but I do not have an academic doctorate. And I prefer for everyone to address me as Karima and nothing else.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I will say Karima. Okay?
Thank
I
you.
will say
Thank you.
Karima. All right, let me just check that we are being seen because I'm being told that they're not seeing me. Can you see me? Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. It
Or
seems
are they
okay
seeing me
now.
too?
Yes, I can also see you. All right. So here is what I would
Okay.
love to know. Okay. Can you please share
Okay.
a little bit of your experience when you started working some 40 odd years ago? What was that like for you, and what was that like for your patients?
Um, and we're going to restrict it to the AIDS epidemic that started or that we recognized in the early 80s. According to the
Okay.
records at St. Vincent's Hospital, where I was educated, the symptoms that we recognize today, or we recognized in 1983 as HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, or AIDS, uh, those symptoms, we saw them and we recorded them at St. Vincent's Hospital since 1926. Um, at St. Vincent's, we had a philosophy of everyone that comes through our path is our patient, compassion and caring. We
Wow.
went through, because I was an emergency medical technician, I had the privilege, sometimes it was not such a positive privilege, of being able to go to other facilities, other hospitals, and see how patients with those symptoms, before it was called AIDS, which came about in October of 1983,
Mm-hmm.
and how they were treated. Um, it was discrimination as its best. It wasn't racial or religious. It was discrimination against the patient with those symptoms. Nobody wanted them. Food was being thrown into the rooms. And at that point, not only did I feel privileged, I felt blessed that I was at St. Vincent. The Sisters of Charity would fight with everybody, from administration to outside people to visitors, that our hospital lived by the philosophy of compassion and caring. And everyone that came across us was our brother or our sister, and that's how we should treat them. That, unfortunately, was not how patients were being treated in other hospitals. The excuse that people were scared that they were going to catch it, I understand that. We just went through that over the past 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand the fear. I also understand that regardless of that fear, we as healthcare providers and professionals have taken an oath And that oath is to treat everyone to our best scientific ability with our best emotional, compassion, ethical abilities. And that at the beginning in the 80s we did not see. It was through a lot of hard work of many organizations that AIDS patients started being recognized as patients and being treated
As
better.
human beings, because if you're telling me that persons were throwing food
They
at
were throwing
someone,
food. Yes, yes. Um, it was as scary. Just as we went through the past 3 years in the 80s, it was not SARS-CoV. It was HIV, and people were scared. The difference
mhm,
was when you walked into St. Vincent's, it was compassion. It was make sure that you're covered up, make sure you have your gloves and your mask on. We don't know how this is transmitted yet, but we cannot treat any patient that comes. And we have stopped using the word patient in the industry. Healthcare all of a sudden is not a service, it's an industry. Um,
mhm.
and we treated every person that came through our doors as a patient, as a brother, as a sister.
Wow. Wow, that's I remember in Jamaica there was a campaign put on by the government where they were telling persons you don't have to burn the furniture because someone sat on it. You don't have to give anyone a special spoon or their special cup and plates. Persons were being locked away in back rooms, forgotten. We don't talk about them anymore. Pillars of the community or family or friends or neighbors. They became invisible.
Uh,
That was very
the
hurtful.
um, the gay men's health crisis did a lot of good work in the early 80s. Uh, but at the same time, it was really difficult. It was almost impossible to convince. And we're talking about the 80s. We're not talking about 2023 where um, people are more accepted. Um, it was a stigma to be gay. It was a stigma to find out that you had HIV because people were going to think you were gay, or that you were a prostitute, or that you used drugs. People forgot that you could get HIV from a blood transfusion. You could get HIV because your husband went out and had an affair. Um, there were so many ways. We have a lot of barriers now. We have a lot of research that has been done in order to protect
Mhm.
people from catching HIV. But even 40 years later, the best protection is to make sure that if you do have sexual contact, that you use a condom. If you do find out you're positive, um, to enter a research program, or to make sure that immediately you go to see a physician for infectious control or infectious diseases. Depending on the country, it's labeled differently. So you can start with a regimen of, it's no longer 27 pills a day. It's
Mhm.
one pill
Mhm.
that you take every day, and the virus becomes undetectable, which means it cannot be transmitted to another human being.
Wow.
The discrimination against people with AIDS. And as you said, in Jamaica, the same thing has happened globally. In some countries, still until now, when they find out somebody's HIV positive, that person is confronted with violence, with threats to their lives, with being ostracized, being kicked out of their families, with losing their jobs. I believe it was Tom Hanks back then who did a movie, Philadelphia.
I
of the
remember
yes,
Philadelphia. I saw it. Yes, that
yes.
was a very good movie.
It was
That
an
was a very good
excellent
movie.
movie, and even today, there are countries that still that when somebody is HIV positive, in spite of all the programs from the World Health Organizations, from ministries of health, from departments of health in different countries, there is still that stigma that when somebody tests positive for HIV.
Wow. All right. So
But
here is my next
but
question.
we got
Okay,
to the point,
continue.
sorry, we got to the point
Mm-hmm.
back in the 80s that if you were HIV positive and you as a woman and you became pregnant, you would be told it might be a good idea to terminate the pregnancy, otherwise you're going to give birth to someone with HIV. You're going to have an AIDS baby. That is no longer true.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, it was not true. We would observe the children to make sure they would convert. They could convert. They could be born with being positive and then they would convert to negative. The opposite, unfortunately, also sometimes became true. By the late 90s, we had children that were 18, 19 years old that participated in sports in high school, that were on HIV medications, had full lives, had children, and
Mm-hmm.
it's no
Mm-hmm.
it's no longer, even though the discrimination is there, even though many
Mm-hmm.
of the survivors keep it a secret, it is no longer an impediment to live a fulfilling full life.
Yeah. I am tackling some of those issues in my second book. Okay, the follow-up. All right. My next question to you, I'd like us to focus a little bit more on Chile, okay, Latin America.
Okay.
Um, and I'd like to know what are the current challenges to managing HIV/AIDS on an individual level? From what you saw when you were here, you spoke at El Congreso. You can tell us a little bit about that
Yeah.
as well. Please do. Please do.
Okay. Well, the speeches at the ex Congreso in Santiago was done on the 4th of September, if I remember correctly, of 2018. And the invitation went out to high school students. We had acceptance from teachers and from schools to be able to fill the ex Congreso, and we felt there was a seventh or an eighth school that we needed to cancel on because we didn't think we had room for them. It was
Wow.
approved by the school. The students knew they were coming. When the parents found out within the 2 days before the speeches, before the conference, that this was about
Hmm.
HIV, um, we ended up with about 68 students out of what we thought was 400 to 500 students. The parents
Mm.
stopped the students from coming. They sent notes to the school. They did not want their children at a conference about HIV and AIDS. A lot of these high school students snuck out of school. And after we started at 10 o'clock, by a quarter to 11, they started filtering into the ex Congreso to listen to the material, the speeches about HIV. So the number one thing that I noticed in Chile, it's very much stigmatized. There is
Hmm.
still a strong association of HIV or AIDS with LGBTQI. Only they get it. That which is absolutely not true. As we know, no judgment, but there is more sexual activity during the teen years in Chile, and it is accepted in Chile than in other parts of the world.
Hmm.
And it is unprotected sexual activity. Not only that, the vans for HIV testing go out every September, October into the streets to the schools to test, and the parents will not allow it. Those are the obstacles I found. There are quite a few organizations, and if you'll allow me to put on my glasses, I'll read some of the names of the organizations that have been
Mm-hmm.
doing great work. One of them is Fundación Daya.
Mm-hmm.
There is Vivo Positivo. There is Iguales. There is which one? Todo Mejora. These are
Can
some
you
of the
put them in the
organizations.
chat as well so that
Uh,
everyone can have access to them should they need to reach out to these organizations for whatever reason, for
okay.
advice, for
All right.
information?
Okay, here we go. Fundación Daya. Um,
Vivo Positivo, I've heard that
right.
before.
Vivo Positivo. Jennifer asked that she's not seeing anyone.
Mm-hmm. I'm responding to her.
Okay.
Try joining again, Sis Jennifer. Try joining again. Maybe that will clear up your screen. Mm-hmm. These organizations have been instrumental in the Chilean society. Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, it's up to them to be able to go out and search for them as opposed to getting acceptance. MinSal, which is the Ministry of Health, has a program just for HIV.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think what other I'm having trouble doing two things at the same time. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I would just love persons to have this information because for whatever reason, if they need any kind of assistance, any kind of help, they know that there are places that you can go to get this information. Do not sit in silence, suffering alone. There are persons that are willing and able with the information and the tools to help. Okay?
Absolutely. In Chile, there's
Yeah.
quite a few organizations. The thing is that even physicians and nurses
Mm-hmm.
are not aware of what's out there. They are even affected by the stigmas. They're even affected by the misinformation. It's a social thing. It's a social thing. It's a question of finding enough people to be able to, I guess, proliferate the information is a good way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of resistance, both with parents, both with the community. Teachers do not want to teach the subject. I remember when I was in Chile, there was I don't know if you remember, there was a program that they wanted to teach in the high schools and middle schools about sex education with everything, the
That's
use
what I
of
was going to ask you
condoms.
about.
Yeah, oral sex, anal sex, vaginal sex, and the parents went up in arms about they didn't want their children knowing
Mm-hmm.
about these things. One of the things that when I was in Chile, I was very lucky to be able to have good conversations because my son was a teenager with his age group,
Mm-hmm.
and they would come over and they would ask questions. And there is a resistance by the adults uh, of why do you want to know that? That you don't need to know that. It's not important. You're never going to be affected by that.
But is it HIV, AIDS, or just intercourse in general?
I think there is a a stigma, even though there is um, there is more open sexual activity in this Chilean society and it's accepted. It's not something you really talk about. You don't talk about frequency. You don't talk about precautions. You don't talk about prevention. Um, whether it's diseases or pregnancy, you just don't talk about it. So even though it's a known fact that everybody is having intercourse or sexual relations, it is not something that is discussed. It's something that's seen as a faux pas to bring in a social situation. So since it's something parents are not comfortable discussing and parents are not comfortable with teachers giving them that information and healthcare workers are not comfortable with their own students, it falls on the activists, which are usually organizations that have dealt historically with the stigma of HIV and with AIDS, which are predominantly the LGBTQI population. And they're the ones in Chile that have created organizations to be able to help out anybody who has any questions.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. And to think that there is sexual activity, we're not going to talk about it and we're not going to educate the youth, not to a level where they can make an informed decision and keep themselves safe. That is alarming.
In Chile, I remember my son saying to me one day, "Hey mom, could I borrow? I think it was something like 10,000 pesos."
Hmm.
And I said, "For what?" And he goes, "I'm gonna lend it to my friend so he can go buy condoms." And I was like, "Okay, explain this to me." Father had no issue with his son taking 30,000 to go and hang out with his friends and have a couple of beers because he was 18. But he had an issue with his son going and spending money buying condoms.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we're still there. Why are you if you have to wear condoms, why are you dating that person? If that person is not clean, why are you dating that person? If you think
Wait,
that
but do they
person could
even get
have some,
tested?
but that is exactly what it is we need to assume that everybody could be carrying HIV or anything else and use protection. You can get HIV from not a blood transfusion anymore, but you fall down and somebody comes to help you and they have a cut on their hand and they're HIV and they're not tested. It can transmit. That's why it's very important. Prevention, testing, at least once a year. If you have multiple partners, once every 3 months, just make sure that you're up to date on all your testing. Make sure that if you test positive, make sure that you're on a regimen so that way it becomes undetectable.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that way you can go on and have a fulfilling life, whether it's sexual or familiar, or if you want to have kids. So that way it's not an issue
Hmm. Hmm. And
until we get a
communication.
vaccine. Until we get a vaccination, we still don't
Yeah,
have a vaccine. We're
yeah.
still
That
testing.
was that was going to be my next question. Okay. Are you aware of any revolutionary research that's currently happening that might affect persons surviving HIV, AIDS, persons who might be exposed, persons who are negative, anything at all that we
Okay.
should be listening out for?
Okay. The first thing is any one of us who is sexually active should be testing at least once a year if they're monogamous. If
Hmm.
they have multiple partners, I believe it's my own philosophy. I'm not reading it anywhere. Every 3 months, just to make sure that you're safe. If you have
Hmm.
more than a couple of partners, you should be using condoms at all times to make sure that you're protected. Any type of sexual activity. I had a teenager say to me, "Oh, but we don't do it that way. We only do oral." It can be transmitted through oral. It can be transmitted through anal. It can be transmitted through vaginal.
Hmm.
The thing is, as long as there is interaction or interchange of bodily fluid, yes, HIV can be transmitted.
Hmm. 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 Oh. And do you know of them working on anything now that might? I mean,
Okay,
the condom itself was revolutionary. Okay.
well,
The condom was revolutionary.
let me tell you, the condoms have been around for at least 7,000 years. There are condoms that were found in Egypt.
I know it was around before we were even aware of it, but for that
Exactly.
long I wasn't aware.
It was it was about
Wow.
7,000 years. We're 2,000 years, and about 5,000 years before that, they had condoms made of sheepskin.
Right, right,
So,
right. I knew the
so
material.
I don't think they were protecting against HIV though.
Wow.
No. The thing is,
Hmm.
condoms is a wonderful, wonderful tool, a wonderful protective sheath that does protect
Hmm.
not only from pregnancy but also a multiple array of diseases,
Hmm.
gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, on top of HIV. Um,
Hmm.
so as far as vaccinations, the past 3 years has sent the entire research world into a world where we're focusing on SARS-CoV, Corona,
Hmm.
depending what you want to call it. But basically, that's the vaccinations everybody's focusing on now. If I remember correctly,
Hmm.
in 2019,
Karima, can you hear me? Karima, are you there? I think we have lost her briefly. Can you hear me? Okay. Let's just give her some time to come back. This has been a lot of information, okay? And most of it is alarming, to say the least. One would hope that in the future, these numbers will fall, education will increase, persons will have greater access to the information that they so desperately need to prevent other persons from becoming infected. And as she said, there are other issues to think about besides HIV/AIDS when you are sexually active. That's not the only thing. There needs to be a kind of global protection global protection that is that we should all consider, okay, and talk to the people in your lives, talk to them, tell the youth. I I've always advocated for
Can you
talking
hear me?
to our children, not just talking, but telling them the truth. Stop hiding behind myths and all of these crazy stories. Tell the children the truth. Okay, you're back with us. Karimah, welcome back.
I apologize. I don't know if it's my setting or just general internet. I heard you say about stop to the stories. You're absolutely right. We
Mm-hmm,
need to stop the stories. There is, as I said, healthcare has to be compassionate. It has to be
mm-hmm,
ethical. But there is science behind it, whether it's the World Health Organization, whether it's the CDC here in the United States, or NIH, or whether it's the MinSal in Chile.
mm-hmm,
Everybody is working on it. The problems is that society is having such a difficult time with this subject. They have had a tough time with the subject of sexuality forever. Whether it's heterosexual or whether it's homosexual, society has a problem with just the idea of sexual contact. So that is a barrier that needs to start in the home. It needs to start as the children are growing up. It's not a wee wee, it's a penis. It's not a whoa whoa, it's a
mm-hmm,
vagina. And until we are
mm-hmm.
able to talk to our children and our children are comfortable enough with asking us about things that may come up with genitalia, and then bring it up a notch as they grow up until it gets to the point where it's a sexuality issue. um,
Mm-hmm.
we cannot just pop up one day when they're 18 years old and sit down and say, okay, we're going to teach you now.
The talk, the talk. It's not
The
the talk,
talk
it's a
needs to
conversation. The
the
talk,
talk
by
needs
the
to
time you're
start.
ready to have the talk, it's too late. They could probably educate you at that point.
Exactly. When my mom tried to have the talk with me, I was 11 years old. I had already heard half the stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
By the time my girlfriend decided to have the talk with her son had been active sexually. He's bisexual. He had been active with both his boyfriend and his girlfriend for 2 years. And
Wow.
she's sitting down,
Two
she's
years.
sitting 2 years. Children are starting sexual contact 11, 12, 13, and nobody's teaching them. So if you see a couple, two boys, two girls, a girl and a boy, oh, how cute. Well, you know what? If you see them looking at each other, if you see them hugging, then you need to sit down and have that talk with them and find out if they're protected.
Mhm. If you're not talking to your child,
No,
someone
it
is.
is absolutely
And you're not a part of that conversation. For me, I remember when I had questions back in Jamaica, there was a friends hotline. Okay. And we could call for whatever reason. We could call just to chat. All the counselors were named Chris. I called every single day. I asked every question, and those counselors were amazing. I don't know if there is a system like that today in Jamaica, but it was fantastic for me. I was able to ask the questions I couldn't ask anyone else, and I got real, concrete information
right.
that helped me. It was age appropriate. There was no one saying, "Oh, go out there and explore." No, I got responses.
Exactly. And that's the way
I
it's
got the
supposed to be.
truth. I
And
got the
and
truth.
it,
I could make informed
exactly.
decisions.
Exactly. The other thing is, Chile is not as fearful as the United States. Healthcare
Mhm.
workers in the United States, whether it's physicians, nurse practitioners, doctors of nursing practice, counselors, there is a fear of malpractice lawsuits, a fear of violating boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
which Chile does not. Chile has that, but it's instilled socially. It's not my child. I shouldn't be talking to them about this. In the United States is we need the parental approval to talk to them about this. Planned
Mm-hmm.
Parenthood in the United States, which was one of the best resources for education, for prevention, has been
Mm-hmm.
basically cut at the knees in a lot of states. In Chile, I was told you can't talk to somebody else's child about these things.
As a
Uh,
healthcare professional, even from
even
that
as a
perspective,
healthcare even as a healthcare professional, you can't talk to someone else's child about HIV, about gonorrhea, about chlamydia, about syphilis, about pregnancy. You cannot talk to them about those things. That is not your place.
wow,
There is
wow.
another subject that we really, especially when it comes to HIV, that we really need to touch upon, and that is victims of rape. Victims of rape. Um, Number one, in a lot of countries around the world, the stigma becomes the victim stigma as opposed to the rapist stigma. A lot of times the victim will not report the rape. And because that victim, he or she does not report the rape, they do not get tested. So that means that by the time they do get tested, they have already started exhibiting symptoms. And
Wow.
violence begets violence. And I have seen many violent diseases. AIDS has become a disease that we can manage. We don't have a cure, we don't have a vaccine yet, but we can manage it, we can treat it, we can have people having fulfilling lives, even if they are
Mm-hmm.
positive. Um,
Everyone deserves
I know we,
love, but if you can do it
yeah,
safely, you know?
and I know we talked
Wow.
about different countries have different stigmas and different social reactions when they find out that somebody is positive. Let me
Mm-hmm.
assure you, everybody that's watching, you cannot get HIV or AIDS from drinking from somebody else's glass. You cannot get HIV or AIDS from hugging someone. You cannot get HIV or AIDS from cuddling up with someone or giving someone emotional support. Um, the only way that you can have someone transmit HIV to you is through direct body fluid transfer from one person to the other. That is the only way. So, and if you are having direct contact and exchanges of body fluids, just make sure you wear a condom.
Get tested. Get tested.
Oh,
Get
get
tested.
tested. I had someone who swore up and down that she was a virgin, and she probably was a virgin. What she failed to tell us is that when she was 14 years old, she was raped. And when she started exhibiting symptoms, she's never had a sexual relationship in her life. But because she was never tested, because she was afraid, because of the stigma of rape, she never reported, she never got tested, and she started exhibiting AIDS symptoms. Being HIV positive does not mean that you have AIDS. AIDS is when you
Mm-hmm.
have the syndrome, when you're actually showing symptoms. The
Mm-hmm.
sarcoma, the
Mm-hmm.
PCP, uh, the best way is exactly what you said. Get tested
Get tested.
often, at least once a year, and use preventive methods like condoms. I'm a big believer in
Hmm.
condoms. And they're
Yeah.
not for filling them up with water and throwing them out the window.
No, use them responsibly. Use them as we should.
Exactly.
Okay? Use them as
But
we
you know
should.
what? If as parents we have condoms in the house, that conversation is going to be a lot easier than when your child comes and says, "I have a polola," to sit down and say, "Hey, listen, you need to buy it." I don't want to discuss that with you, mom. But when the condoms have always been there
Hmm.
at, it's within their vision to see them there, it's a lot easier to go to either parent and say, listen, like I want to talk about how to use this, or do you mind if I take one out of the box? I want to learn to
Hmm.
use it, or I want to play with it. It's fine.
That's okay too. Yeah. There is a
That's okay too.
family planning clinic, Diagonal Paraguay con La Alameda, which is CMR, and they have
Hmm.
wonderful professionals there. I thought, once my child is a little bit older, he's 7 years old now, and of course we have the baby. He is not ready. He's almost 2. But as soon, I mean, we have already started the conversation. He has
Okay.
questions. He has questions about what he's seen on TV. What is going on there? What are they doing? What is that, mommy? And he will tell me, oh, it's love. It's they're making a baby. And I'm talking to him, and I want him to feel safe in his home, talking to his parents. Talk to me, tell me. Okay? I want that conversation, but at some point I want to take him to one of those matronas where he can sit down and have, maybe other things will come up, other questions will come up, and they can maybe guide him a little bit better than I could,
Absolutely.
because they would have more information. I am not afraid of that conversation. It is a part of life. It is a part of
Um,
life. I need him to be
absolutely.
safe. I need him to keep
Absolutely.
his partners safe. That is more
Absolutely.
important to me than my hang-ups. Okay?
Uh, I don't think you have hang-ups. You and I are
Maybe
pretty similar that we don't have boundaries.
we need to have these conversations. Once
Absolutely.
I heard, a little girl, she was maybe 9, we were in the metro, and she asked her mom a very simple question. Everyone could hear, "Mommy, why do men have this thing under their neck?" And her mom said to her, "Oh, because when Adam ate the apple, it got stuck in his throat." This is a 9-year-old girl, 10 years old, I don't know, but she was really tall. This was a very normal question. And the answer seemed right there. But no, that was the response. I never forgot it. I never forgot it because it was scary. It was scary to me. This little girl walked away with that information.
Yep.
But
Let
as
me
you
ask you
said,
something.
hmm
I'm going to ask you, your child is 7 years old. And
hmm
if I remember correctly, he is bright. He has not asked about mom and dad holding hands or sleeping together.
he will tell you, he will make this sign, okay?
Okay.
And he will say, "You love each other." Okay?
Okay.
And yes, yes, he has started questioning certain things, and I will ask him certain things out of the blue. "What do you think they're doing? What's going on there? What is that you're doing? Why are you doing that? Where did you see
Good.
that? What's going on there? Let me see the videos." Okay? Show me. And the reaction is, "Oh my God, is that what you're watching?" No, let's talk about this. What do you think is happening? And wherever he is where I try to meet him. And of course,
Very
his
good.
dad as well. We are having the conversation, and I want us to continue. And as it becomes, I don't know, more technical, when he starts asking more technical questions, whatever I cannot answer, we're going to find the answers together. Or at least show him where he can find them safely. Because, like I said, if you're not talking to your children, someone else is, because they are
Is
looking for the information. They're looking
absolutely. And
for
they're like
it.
sponges. They're like sponges. Our children
Hmm.
are like sponges and they know how to look things up on the internet.
Yes, they do. All right, I have another question for you. And then, of course, for our audience, if you have a question, when we're done with this, you can always send your question in the chat. Okay? All right, so my question is, could you share, rather, your most encouraging? I know that you have a wealth of experience and knowledge, but could you share one of maybe your most encouraging stories with me, with our listeners?
Relating to HIV?
Yes. Yes.
1998, 18-year-old involved in a study on HIV, 27 pills, 3 times a day. 2023, I got an email to come and see the high school graduation of his daughter. He was born, his mom died
Nice.
of AIDS when he was a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and they put him on the regimen. And when I met him in 98, he was 17 or 18. And it's it felt good to see that progression. It felt good to see the the
Oh,
on the same on the same uh, thread. We've lost so many people, and it's not the AIDS that we've lost people to. It's ignorance. It's lack of communication. It's lack of proper care. Um, it's lack of education globally. I'm not just saying US or Chile or Canada, but globally. There are still countries that when someone is diagnosed with HIV, they actually burn them alive. I am not going to disparage any country at this point, but the stories still come up. There is there are the UN human rights campaigns. There are the World Health Organization. There is the Red Cross, Red Crescent societies who keep the scientific numbers. I'm not talking scientifically here, like we discussed before coming on. My being here is from the social and the emotional view and how that has impacted us. Um, it is 43 years later, and we're still scared. We're still in denial that it could affect us. This is not an epidemic that has gone away. It's an epidemic that we have struggled with, that we have done our best to keep going like activists. We have struggled to make sure everybody gets tested. We have struggled to make sure that we have information out there, even though the waves of resistance keep coming at us of, we don't want our children knowing this. This is not healthy. It's not natural. It's not normal. Having HIV is not a natural event. Having HIV means that somewhere we failed our children and we failed to protect them.
all right. I am going to open the floor for anyone who would like to ask a question. Is there anything you would like to know? You can just type it in the chat. Um, while we're waiting for that, if anyone wants to share also, you can go ahead and do that. While we're waiting for that, my final question for you is, do you have any advice beyond all the advice that we have been sharing this entire time? Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to say to me, to our listeners, on the subject of HIV/AIDS? Is there anything else that you think that we should know that was not asked or was not dealt with today? Do you have anything?
I'm 61 years old. Dating at 61, you figure you've been through everything already. Have that conversation when you sit down with someone on your first date. When was the last time you had your blood work done? How many partners have you had? Are you positive? Even if you're undetectable, are you positive? Are you negative? As we're getting older, our immune system is not as strong as it was when we were younger. We
Mm-hmm.
also need to make sure if we travel that wherever we travel, our regimen can travel with us.
Mm-hmm.
There are regimens, there are injections, there are regimens that are pills, one pill a day to stay
Mm-hmm.
undetectable. If you're going from one country to another, make sure that you take your history with you so you don't
Mm-hmm.
put yourself in a position where you are going to have those numbers go up. I said I would not speak scientifically, and I will not speak scientifically. You do not
Mm-hmm.
want to go from undetectable to detectable. You do not want to be exposed because you did not sit down with this person that you're dating at 61 or 65 years old and had that conversation of how many partners have you had. You don't have to give a number. It's either one or it's more than one. If it's more than one, when was the last time you were tested for HIV
Mm-hmm.
or any other STIs? Make sure that the
Mm-hmm.
person that you're going to be with, that you take precautions. Make sure you decide before you start dating, before your first encounter, if this is going to be monogamous or polygamous. If it's monogamous and you both agree to it, still wear protection. If you decide you want to have multiple partners, make sure that you wear protection and that you protect not only yourself, the person that you're dating, anybody else that either one of you comes in contact with.
Mm-hmm.
If we remember correctly, there was, let me see if I can still pronounce this man's name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a Gaetan Duga. He was a flight attendant who managed to infect 2,000 people, more than 2,000 people in
Wow.
1983 with HIV around the world, male and
Wow.
female,
No.
knowingly.
Wow.
And another thing, I see Jennifer sent us a question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer,
Mm-hmm.
thank you very much for your question. I understand that you ended up getting divorced, but one of the things that we really, really need to focus on is not to place blame on whoever comes home with a disease. Nobody went out there to get sick. Nobody went out there to get sick and bring it home. We all make mistakes. There are people that have affairs even when they're in monogamous relationships. It happens. It's happened all through history. The point is nobody goes out there and says, I'm going to go get AIDS and bring it home to my spouse. And The person that contracts the disease, they need our love, they need our support. It's very human to be angry at them for betrayal. I totally understand that. Once you're able to handle that feeling, they are still part of the family. They are still the parents of your children. Or if that person that has done the betrayal is your child, that child also needs your support, needs your compassion, needs you to be there for them until they can be undetectable and be able to go on and have a fulfilling, uh, full life for the rest of their life.
It's difficult. It's difficult. Every side, every angle has its own challenges, you know?
We have another question. I
Mm-hmm.
blamed him because he knew he was bisexual before he married me. There, as I said before, there is a big stigma still about sexuality, whether it's being bisexual, whether it's being gay, whether it depends on the culture. There are cultures where people marry heterosexually because it is still the expectation that you have to marry and create a family. That communication of sitting down with your spouse while before you actually marry, before that wedding night, does not exist. So you get married because that's what they expected. And then, since there has been no sexual contact before the wedding, you don't find out that that person is gay or bisexual until after the wedding. It's not a question that they held it as a secret from you. It's a question that socially, culturally, ethnically, it was not something that was okay to discuss. And we have to understand being what society calls normal is the most abnormal thing there is. There is no such thing as normal. Normal means that you accept the person, you love the person for who they are, and that they can feel free enough to tell you who they are, regardless of what they're feeling, what they're thinking, or what they're choosing.
Wow. Jennifer also says, I want to invite you to my audience in China. She has quite a following. Okay.
I would love
So,
to.
most definitely. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Can you put in the chat your contact information, how persons can reach you should they have any questions or any comments or simply, I don't know, to say hello? Okay, I believe
Okay.
that you have helped me. You have also reached out to the persons that are currently listening. And of course, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I definitely appreciate it. Okay. I'm
Thank you for
also going to
having me.
put I'm also going to put in the chat the link to my book. Okay. So that persons can find it, they can read it. Um, it is fiction, okay? But again, it talks a lot about the issues that we have touched on here. I'm going to put it in the chat here. Okay. All right. And I'm also going to put my website. I am thinking about compiling stories, true stories, if persons would give me the opportunity, the privilege, the honor of telling their stories. I would love to compile stories or maybe just a general story and then have different sections. I'm not sure what format that is going to take, but persons can find me through my website. I'm also going to put my email so you can email me. I am still a dinosaur when it comes to social media, believe it or not. Um, so I'm not on any of the big platforms just yet, but I am getting there. I promise I will get there. Okay. But you can definitely find me directly on through my website, and you can email me. I will respond to you. Okay. I would love to have the honor of telling stories for persons who may be affected in any way. You could be negative and have had contact with someone, or you have questions, whatever it may be. You can also send me this information anonymously. Okay, you can make up a fake email address or whatever, send it to me. All right, please do. I would love to hear from you. I would love to talk to you. Okay. Um, for our next, I seem to have lost Karima again. I'm sure she's going to be back very soon. Okay. For our next program, which is going to be on Wednesday, October 11th, also at 9 p.m. EST. We're going to be talking to Alicia Anderson. She is a motivational speaker and a fellow writer. Okay. She published a book called HIV, My Journey Through Grace. And I am definitely looking forward to hearing from her and also to share her experiences with all of you. So tell your friends, tell everyone, share this on all your platforms. Okay. Would love for all of you and for others to join us next week, where we will ask the difficult questions. For Alicia, I would also, if you can send me your questions before the show, that will be fine. But of course, you can use the chat during our episode to ask your questions. All right. Do not be afraid to reach out. The final word that I would love to leave with all of you is that there is hope. Okay. Whatever you're going through, whatever it is, there is hope, and there is someone that you can speak to. Karimah wrote a series of different organizations that you can reach out to. Please try to find also local organizations that might be able to assist you. Do not suffer in silence. Okay? You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. All right. I'm just going to give it a little bit more to see if Karima will join us again, because I would love if she had maybe a last word or something she would like to add, um, that she can share. This has been an incredible experience for me. Okay. Thank you, Sis Jennifer, who organized the virtual book tour that launched all of this and made it possible. Thank you so much for dragging me out of my shell as a writer. I was terrified of speaking about myself, speaking about my book, speaking about my experience, all of that. Okay. I had one very close friend of mine. She said, be as loud as you can and take up as much space as you can. All right. Sis Jennifer said to me, if your dreams do not scare you, they are not big enough. So terrified, also very scary for someone who was petrified to even publish my first book. Okay, that was a journey for me. It was not easy, but I did it, and I wish I had done it sooner. So for those of you who are writers, who are writing, please, 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 we are waiting for your genius. We're waiting for your books. Go ahead and publish, get to writing, finish them. You will feel so much better. Scary. It's going to be scary. Okay? I can guarantee you that. But it will be worth it. That I can also guarantee you. All right? Maybe your subject matter is not for everyone. You will find your audience, or rather, your audience will find you, but you have to put yourself out there. All right? Okay, we are going to wrap up now. Unfortunately, Karimah has not rejoined, but we have heard a lot from her. There was a lot to hear, there was a lot to learn. Okay, injecting a bit of support and tolerance. We could maybe change someone's life. All right, so the onus is on all of us to affect our worlds. Your small little world. That's what you need to do. All right. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye to you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. This has been amazing. Okay, join me next week when I talk to Alicia Anderson and hear her story. All right. Bye, everyone. See you next week where you can come and listen with me.